Hello friends, Satyendra here, and in this video, let's design swivel bearing in Creo Parametric. So let's get started. So this is the swivel bearing. So once you complete your assembly will look like this, and once you complete your assembly mechanism, your mechanism will run like this. Now let's see the drawing. So this is the drawing, this is the assembly drawing, and this is the part drawing. So I will use these two drawings to complete all the parts and to complete the assembly. So you can take a snapshot if you want to practice it. Now let's start the assembly. So I'll start this assembly with the first part, which is base, and for this I'll go to new, part, solid, assign the name. So the name is base, uncheck use default template and say OK. Now from here you select the proper part template. So I'll go with this template. This is a metric template. I'll say OK. Now to start this part, I will start with this base, which is this one. So for this I'll go to extrude onto the top datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now you go to palette, shapes, racetrack. Just double click it and place it here, close it. Now drag it and place it here, say OK. Now this dimension is 134. This one I'll delete it. This radius is 36. Move this point to this reference. Now the sketch is done, say OK. Now the thickness is 10. Say OK. Now the next feature is this feature, which is a revolve feature. So go to revolve onto the front datum plane, normal. Now place a datum center line somewhere here. Then go for reference and select this as a reference. Now draw the rough sketch. Start like this, come down, go like this, then like this, and close the sketch. Now the dimension. So this is dia 42, this is dia 46, this is 18, and then you have a dimension from here till this bottom. This is 72, and this dimension is dia 65. So the sketch is done, say OK and OK. Now the next feature is this one, which is again a revolve feature. So go to revolve onto the front datum plane, say normal. Again place a datum center line somewhere here, and then go for reference. Select this edge as a reference, then draw the rough sketch. Start like this, then go like this. Make this line parallel with this reference. Now the dimension. So this dimension, this is 50, and this gap is 6. Say OK and OK. Now the next feature is this cut, which is this one and this one. So go to extrude, select this face, normal. Draw a center line somewhere here. Then go to palette, shapes, racetrack. Double click it, place it here, close it, drag it and place it here. Say OK. Now delete this dimension and place dimension between these. This is 10. Then delete this dimension. This radius is R5. Now select the sketch, go for mirror and mirror it. Now just draw a center line in the mid of this and in the mid of this. Now the dimension from here till here, this is 102 and say OK. Flip the direction. Depth you make it 2 next and say OK. Now the next feature is this hole. This is a standard hole M20. So go to hole, select this face, switch on the center axis, hold the control key and select this axis. Go to standard. From here you select M20. So I'll go with this. Depth you make it 2 next. Say OK. Now the next hole, which is coming somewhere here, this is M8. So switch on all the datums and then go for hole. Simply select this face. Now go for standard and select M8. Now drag this handle to this bottom face. This is 9 and then drag this handle to this datum plane. This you make it 0. Depth you make it 2 next and say OK. So your part is almost done. Now couple of rounds. So go to round, select this edge, this radius is 4, select this edge and say OK. One more time round, this time select this edge, this is also radius 4, say OK. One more round, select this edge and this edge. This is radius 1, say OK. This one, this is also radius 1, say OK. And this part is done. Now save it. Now the next part, which is fork, and for this again go to new, part, solid, assign the name. So the name is fork, uncheck use default template and say OK. Now from here select the proper part template. So go with this and say OK. Now this part is a little complicated, so you need to create all the features carefully. So I'll start this part with this feature, and for this I'll go to extrude onto the top datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now draw a circle first, somewhere here. Now this dia is dia 32, say OK. Now the height is this one, 18 plus 6, which is 24, say OK. Now the next feature, which is this one and this one. So for this I'll go to revolve onto the front datum plane, normal. Now draw a datum center line first, somewhere here. Now this gap is 54. Now place again a center line here. Now draw the sketch. So I'll start with line. I'll go like this. One more line, just like this. Then a 3-point arc, just like this. Now the dimension. So this dimension, this is 20. This gap, this is 14. And this radius is 15. Now mirror the sketch with this center line. Now the gap between this and this is 60. Now close the sketch here and here. Say OK and OK. Now the next feature, which is this one, and this is a swept blend feature. So for this, first I'll draw a path onto the front datum plane, sketch, normal. Now switch on the center axis and go for reference. Select this reference, this one and this one. Now draw the sketch. So start from here, go like this and draw like this. Then add a fillet somewhere here. Then dimension. So from here till here, this will be 18, half of 36. Now this radius will be 3. Because this one is 8 and thickness is 5, so the inner one will be 3. Now this angle. Now draw center line here. Drag this side. Then place the dimension. So for this dimension, place a sketch point here. Now the dimension. So from here till here, this is 2. And the sketch is done. Say OK. Now go for swept blend. Select this path. Go for sections. Sketch section. Sketch. Now place a center line first, somewhere here, and then draw a rectangle. Start like this, make it symmetry. Now this is 5 and this is 30. Say OK. Go for insert and select this point, say sketch. Once again, place a center line first and then draw the rectangle. This is 5 and this is 30. Say OK. Now once again go to insert and say sketch. Again draw center line first and then a rectangle. This is 5 and this I will take 24. I'll say OK. Select the last section, go to sketch, make this value 22 and say OK. Change this value to 20, say OK. Now go to option and here you select the second option, set perimeter control and say OK. So this blend feature is done. Now select this feature and go for mirror. Select this datum plane and say OK. Now the next feature, which is this rib feature. So for this you can go to rib or you can directly go to extrude. Both are OK. Now for this, go to reference, select this as a reference and this as a reference. Draw a center line first, somewhere here, then a line. Start from here, go like this and then place like this. Now this line I will mirror it to this reference. Now the dimension. So this is 60 and this gap is 1.5. Now you just drag it up, draw a center line somewhere here, then a sketch point somewhere here, then the dimension. So from here till here this is 1 and the sketch is done. This is open sketch. Now just say OK. Now the thickness is 8, so make it 8. Make it symmetry and say OK. Now the next feature, which is this revolve cut. So for this, go to revolve onto the front datum plane, normal. Draw datum center line somewhere here. Then draw the sketch. So start from here, go like this, come down, go like this, come down, close the sketch. Delete equal constant if you have. Now the dimension. So this is diameter 26, this is diameter 20, this is 6 and the sketch is done. Say OK and OK. Now the next feature, which is this hole M10. So go to hole, select this face, switch on the center axis, hold the control key and select this axis. Go for standard, select M10, depth you make it to all and say OK. So this part is almost done. Now the only thing left is couple of rounds. So go to round, select this edge and this one. This is radius 8. Say OK. Again go to round. This time you select this edge, right click, add radius, This side it will be 1. Same way, hold the control key and select this edge. This will be 8. Now this side, hold the control key and select this edge. This is 1. Then similarly this side, this is 8. Say OK. One more round, which is this side and this side. This is 1. OK. Now the next round, which is somewhere here and here. Now the same round is also coming this side, this side, this side and this side. Say OK. Now the last round, which is here and here. Say OK. And this part is done. Now save it. Now the next part, which is Spindle. Again create a new file. Go to New, Part, Solid. File name is Spindle. Uncheck Use Default Template. Say OK. And select the proper part template. So this is the drawing and this is a revolve feature. So I'll simply go to revolve onto the front datum plane, normal. Switch off all the datums. Place a datum center line somewhere here. Then draw the sketch. So draw a line just like this. This is dia 26. Then draw the rough sketch. Close the sketch. Now this is 6 and this is 100. And this die I take 20. Say OK. Now the next feature is this thread. So go to Engineering, Cosmetic Thread. First you select this face and then you select this face. Now this is 85. Go to Standard and this is M20. So select M20 from here. And say OK. Now the last feature is a chamfer. So create a chamfer somewhere here. This is 1 and say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the next feature, which is Nerd Nut, and for this once again go to New, Part, Solid, assign the name. So the name is Nerd Nut. Uncheck Use Default Template and select the proper part template. So this is the drawing. So to create this feature, I will go to Extrude, onto the top datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now draw a circle first, somewhere here. The dia is 40. Say OK. And this is 16. Make it symmetric. Say OK. Now the next feature is this hole. So for this, go to hole, select this face, switch on the center axis, hold the control key and select this axis. go to standard, and from here you select M20. Depth you make it to next. Say OK. Now the next feature is this null feature. So for this I'll create a sketch onto the front datum, sketch, normal. I'll draw a sketch point first, somewhere here, and then I will draw the line. Starting from here, I'll go like this. This angle I'll take 60 degree. Then I will add one center line somewhere here, and then I will mirror this line with reference of this. Say OK. Now select the sketch, go for project, and select this face. OK. Once again select the sketch, go for project, and select this face. Say OK. Now the next feature is this hole. So for this, go to hole, select this face, switch on the datum plane. Now drag this handle to this datum plane and this handle to this datum plane. This you make it 0 and this make it 0. Go to standard, and from here you select M6. Depth you make it 2 next. Say OK. Next feature is a chamfer. So select this edge, chamfer value is 1. Say OK. Now the last feature, which is this node feature. So for this, go to sweep, select this curve, go for sketch, normal, draw a triangle here, just like this, make all sides equal, and then from here till here this you make it 0.25. Say OK. Go for remove material. Say OK. Similarly, one more time, select this curve and go for sweep, sketch, normal, draw a triangle, just like this, make all sides equal, and then from here till here this is 0.25. Say OK. Go for remove material and say OK. Now select this feature, go for pattern, axis pattern, switch on the center axis, select this axis 360 degree, 89 numbers. Say OK. Similarly, select this feature, go for pattern, axis pattern, select this axis 360 degree, 89. Say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the next part, which is disk 1. So for that, go to new, part, solid, part name, which is disk 1, uncheck use default template, say OK, and select a proper part template. So this is the drawing, and for this I'll go to Extrude, onto the right datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now just draw a circle somewhere here. Now this die is 4.5, say OK. Thickness is 2.5, say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the 7th part is also similar to this. So I'll create one more part which is similar to that, which is disk 2. So this is the drawing, and for this once again go to Extrude, select the right datum plane, normal, draw a circle, circle die is 6.5, say OK, thickness is 2.5, say OK, save it. Now the next part, which is this one, set screw 1, and for this once again go to new part, this is set screw 1, uncheck use default template, say OK, and select this part template, say OK. So this is the drawing, and for this I'll simply go to Extrude, onto the right datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now draw a circle, this is dash 6, say OK, thickness is 9, say OK. Now the next feature, which is this cut, this one. So for this once again go to Extrude, select this face, normal, place a sketch point somewhere here, and then draw a line starting from here, go like this. This angle you make it 45 degree and say OK. Flip the direction, go for remove material, thickness is 1.2, flip to make it center. Now this depth is 2 and say OK. Now the next feature, which is this M6 thread. So for this go to engineering, cosmetic thread, you first select this face and then select this face. Now go to standard, and from here you select M6, say OK. Now the last feature is the chamfer. So select this edge, hold the control key, select this and this. This is one and say OK. And this part is done. Now save it. Now go to file, save as, save a copy, and here you save this part with the name set screw 2, say OK, open that part, move this drag handle up, now the second part, this is 11, and this is 8, regenerate. Second feature, edit this. So this is 1 and this is 2.5. Ctrl G to regenerate. Next feature, edit it. Here you change it to a mate. This you make it 11 and say OK. Now the last feature, which is chamfer. Save it. Now the next part, which is this one, set screw 3. So once again go to new, part, the name is set screw 3, uncheck use default template, say OK, and select the proper part template. Now this is the drawing. So for this, my first feature will be a revolve feature onto the front datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now place a datum center line somewhere here, then draw a line from here this side. This is 10. Then draw the rough sketch. So start from here, go like this, then close the sketch. Now the dimension. So from here till here, this is 33. This angle is 60 degree, and the sketch is done. Now say OK and OK. Now the next feature is this cut. So once again go to extrude, select this face, normal. Go to reference, select these datum planes. Now draw a line, start like this and go like this. This angle is 45 degree, say OK. Go to thickness, flip the direction. Thickness is 1.6. Make it symmetric. Now this depth is 3. Say OK. Now the next feature is this thread M10. So once again go to engineering, cosmetic thread, select this face and then you select this face. Now go to standard and from here you select M10 and say OK. Now the last feature, which is chamfer. Select this edge, hold the control key and select this edge. Say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the next part, which is bearing block, and for that once again go to new, part, this is bearing block, uncheck use default template, say OK and select the proper part template. So this is the drawing, and for this I will go to revolve onto the top datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Place a datum center line somewhere here and then a sketch center line somewhere here. Now draw a line, draw like this. This is 42 and this is dia 40. Now draw one more line starting from here, this side, then one line like this, then draw a 3-point arc from here till here, just like this. Now these three, you just mirror it like this and then close the sketch. Now the dimension. So from here till here till here, one dimension from here till here, this is 54. Then this is dia 48, and your sketch is done. Just say OK and OK. Now the next feature is this one, and for this go to Extrude, onto the right datum plane, normal, draw a circle. This is dia 15, say OK. This is 57. Uncheck remove material, make it symmetric and say OK. Now the next feature, which is this cut, so go to hole, switch on the center axis, select this face, hold the control key and select this axis. This dia, this is dia 24, make it 2 next, say OK. Now the next feature is this one. So for this, once again go to hole, select this face, hold the control key and select this axis. Now the whole dia is 4. Change it to standard and then select countersink. Now this angle is 60 given here, and this is dia 10. So this distance, make it dia 10. Then this depth is 9. So this is 9 and say OK. Now mirror this feature with the right datum plane, say OK. Now go to view, sections and select the top datum plane. Make it section A. Now the last feature is this hole, which is here, dia 3 CSK at 90 degree to dia 6. So go to hole, select this face, switch on all the datums. Now drag this handle to this datum plane and this handle to this plane. This you make it 0 and then this also you make it 0. Now this is dia 3, go to shape, change it to standard and select countersink. Now countersink, it is given there, dia 6 at 90 degree and the depth is 2 next. Say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the next part, which is bush, so go to new part, it is bush, uncheck use default template, say OK, select the part template. So this is the drawing, and for this go to extrude, select the front datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Draw the circle, 2 numbers. This is dia 18 and this is dia 24. Say OK. This is 54 and make it symmetric. Say OK. Now the next feature, which is this hole, div 3. So go to hole, select this face, switch on the datum plane, drag this handle to this plane and this handle to this plane. This you make it 0. And this also you make it 0. Dash 3, depth you make it 2 next. Say OK. And this part is done. Save it. Now the last part, which is a lock nut. So go to new, part, it is a lock nut. Uncheck use default template, say OK. Select the part template. Now this is the drawing, and for this I will go to extrude onto the right datum plane, normal. Switch off all the datums. Now here I will go to palette, I will go to 6-sided hexagon, place it here, close, I will drag it like this, I will rotate it like this and I will say OK. This one I will just delete it, and then I will place a dimension from here till here. This is 20. Say OK. Now the thickness is 5. Say OK. Now the next feature is this M10 hole. So go to hole, select this face, drag this handle to this datum plane and this handle to this datum plane. This you make it 0 and this make it 0. Go to standard and from here you select M10. Depth you make it 2 next. Say OK. Now the next feature is a chamfer here. So for that go to Revolve, select this datum plane, normal, switch off all the datums. Now place a datum center line somewhere here and then draw the sketch. So start like this, now the dimension, so this you make it 5 and this angle you make it 30 degree. Say OK. Go for remove material and say OK. And this nut is done. Save it. Now all the parts are done. Now I'll assemble it to complete the assembly. So for that, create an assembly file. So go to new, assembly, assign the name. So the name is swivel bearing. Uncheck use default template and say OK. Now from here you select a proper assembly template. So select this and say OK. Now for this assembly, this is the first part, which is base. So to assemble it, go to assemble, select the base, open. Now since this is the first part, you simply go to automatic and make it default. So when you make it default, the part coordinate system will assemble with the assembly coordinate system. Say OK. Now the second part, which is this one, this is fork. So once again go to assemble, select the fork, just double click it. Now to assemble it, assemble this inner surface with this. So this is the first constraint, move it up. Now for the second constraint, you select this surface with this surface. This you change it to distance and move it to the gap of 25 and say OK. Now the third part, which is this one, which is the spindle. So go to assemble, select spindle, tilt it, now to assemble it, simply select this face along with this face, and then for the second constraint you select this face along with this face, and this part is done. Just say OK. Now the fourth part, which is this one, which is knurled nut. So go to assemble, select knurled nut, now select this inner surface with this, move it down, then select this face with this face, and then I need to rotate this with 45 degree. So for that, go to placement, and here you first uncheck this allow assumptions. So when you uncheck it, you can tilt it, go for new constraint. Now first I'll say OK. I will hide these things to avoid confusion. Now simply edit it, and then I will switch on the datum planes. For third constraint, this is the second constraint, go for third. Now here you simply select this datum plane and assemble it with this datum plane. Make it coincident and say OK. Now you can unhide it. Now the next part, the fifth part. So the fifth part is disk 1 and sixth is set screw 1. So go to assemble, select disk 1. Now this part, first you select this face and assemble with this face, and then you just say OK. This time you just hide these parts and then edit it and assemble it with reference of this part. So just switch on the datum planes, go to placement, next constraint, select this plane with this, move it inside, now this value take it 10 and select allow assumptions. So now it is fully constrained. Say OK. Now the next part, which is 6th one, set screw 1. So go to assemble, set screw 1. Now again you select this face with this face and then this face with this face. Go to placement, allow assumption, and this you make it coincident. Say OK. So this is done. Now the next part is 7th and 8th. Disk 2 and set screw 2. So go to assemble, select disk 2 first, select this surface along with this surface, and then you just switch on the datum planes and select this face along with this datum plane. This gap you make it 10 and say OK. Now the next part is the 8th part, set screw 2. So go to assemble, set screw 2. Here also select this face first, go with this and then select this face along with this face. Flip the direction and make it coincident. Say OK. Now the 9th part, which is this one, which is bearing block. So go to assemble, select bearing block, now for the first constraint you select this face along with this face. Then switch on the datum plane and go for the second constraint. Select this datum plane along with this datum plane. So it is fully constrained. Say OK. Now the next part is this 11th part, which is set screw 3. But before I assemble that, first I'll create a section view. So this is section A. I'll say OK. Now go to assemble, set screw 3, move it back, now first you select this face, assemble with this. Now you can move it inside, go for the second constraint, and this time you select this conical surface with this surface. This you make it tangent. Then go for third constraint, switch on the datum plane and select this plane along with this plane. Now it is fully constrained. Say OK. Now select this part, go for repeat, select these 3 constraints, add, and then you select the similar surface here. So first is this one, then second is this one, and then third. Say OK. Now the last part, which is lock nut, which is coming here and here. So go to assemble, go for lock nut, select this face along with this face, and then you select this face along with this face. Say OK. Select this part, again go for repeat, select this to constraint, add, and then this side you select this face and this face and say OK. And all parts are assembled and this assembly is done. So this was the swivel bearing in Creo Parametric, and I hope this video will be helpful. Now write down your views about this video in the comment section below. Like the video and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.